Doug Richards is competing in a half marathon in Sri Lanka.
The first 6.5 miles were entirely uphill up this mountainside.
When he got to the top, Doug found an unusual greeting party.
So when I eventually dragged myself up to the peak of this hill, I was met by this group of 6 small children, about, I don't know, maybe 6 to 10 years old. One of them shouted out to me and said, "Can we run with you, grandfather?"
The joy of running had a Pied Piper effect on the children.
As we ran down this road which wound down the mountainside, other children joined me, and by the time we got to the first village I had about 40 children all singing and dancing and running with me, and it was just an absolutely magical moment, and one I will never ever forget.
I'm Michelle Lewis, and this is the Running Tales podcast. This week I spoke to Doug Richards, the author of Running Hot and Cold, and discovered every runner's journey starts with their first mile.
My running tale began with a 1 mile run. It began, I was in my sort of early 30s, and my son had a nightmare upstairs when I was down watching the telly one evening, and I ran up the stairs to calm him down, and by the time I got to his bedroom, 13 steps, I was out of breath. And it just made me think that, this is not good. You're only in your early 30s. You're already out of breath. Get yourself fitter. And it was, in fact, the year of the very first London Marathon, 1981. And I just recently watched it on the television. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to give this running a go. And so I did. I went out the following morning and I did a 1 mile run round the block. Came back, went straight back to bed.
We've all done that.
But that was the beginning. And then gradually I increased the distance. I gradually got more and more hooked on it. Eventually, probably about 18 months later, ran my first marathon. And then later on in life, started sort of traveling as well, and traveling around the world and running in all sorts of amazing places.
Okay, before we get there, because I'm super excited to find out about all these places that you've run. The first marathon, if you can explain to our listeners which one it was it the London?
No, my very first road marathon was the Southampton Marathon. But I think before that, I'd run what is now called the Beachy Head Marathon, which was then called the Seven Sisters Marathon, which is...
Yes, I did that 2 years ago. Still have nightmares from it.
Yeah, it's a toughie, but it's beautiful scenery. But Southampton was my first road marathon.
You did start running in your 30s. If you don't mind, for the listeners, can you let them know roughly how old you are now?
I don't mind. I'm 72.
And the reason why I asked that is because Beachy Head Marathon wasn't called Beachy Head back then when you did the marathon, was it?
No, it was called the Seven Sisters Marathon because the very last section of it is along the cliff tops, and there are 7 successive it's a roller coaster of 7 cliffs.
Very quickly, and I was quite surprised because I am currently reading your book, Running In and Out, and we'll get on to how you became an author afterwards. You really got into the marathons, and I couldn't believe how quickly you got into ultras.
Yes, I did. Having done a few marathons, and including Beachy Head and another one along the Sussex Downs that was called the Three Forks Marathon. I was born in Brighton, so I lived in Sussex at the time, although I've moved since. And so I did do a race along the South Downs Way from Winchester to Eastbourne, which is 80 miles. So that was my first experience of ultra marathon running, and it was an amazing experience to run 80 miles.
With the running, you did have a break, didn't you, early on as well? You did have a break. Are you happy to share?
Yes, of course. I don't mind. Yeah, unfortunately, shortly after I did the very first ultra, my marriage broke up. We're still in touch with each other. We get on well. But for 9 years, I was a single parent. And being a single parent, and particularly when I was working in London and having to commute from Sussex to London every day, doesn't leave much time for running. So I did have a break from running because of that, because of being a single parent.
So it did affect you mentally, didn't it? Your mental health, it really did.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm a great advocate for the benefits of running on mental health. I went through some very dark periods of depression and still occasionally have episodes of anxiety and depression, although I'm getting much better at actually managing them.
Do you find when you have these episodes that it's when you're not running, or does running help you?
Running helps me. I think if you're in the very bottom of the pit, if you know what I mean, it's very, very hard to motivate yourself to do anything. But once you've begun to sort of begin to climb out, then running, for me at least, is just a sort of magical medicine. I can go out, I can think more clearly. My thoughts, I don't have all these cluttered thoughts that I get otherwise. And so running really helps me when I'm in the recovery phase, and it helps me, even in these crazy times we live today, just going out for a run every day just gives you that little breather.
That's what I was going to say to you. We're January 2021 at the moment, we're recording, and we're in another lockdown. What advice would you give to, those that are not exercising and that are suffering mentally at the moment?
Yeah, just even if it's just to get out there and walk. I live alone, so I've got no one else sort of to talk to other than my cat, who's sitting in the window listening to me now.
I've got two cats, don't worry.
Oh, beautiful. Yes, but just get outside. I mean, on days, at the moment it's very snowy outside, and so I probably won't run today because it looks pretty icy underfoot. But even if I go out for a walk, sometimes I go out picking up litter. I do that for a volunteer litter picking, just to get out in the fresh air. It really does help just to get out the house for an hour a day.
And do you find that when you were out, when we had the lockdown period, and even now while you're in the lockdown period, that the running community are running around you, because you have got a strong running community support, haven't you, in your area?
Oh, absolutely. We have a fantastic running community. I have my own running group called Crabs Cross Chasers, but there are many running clubs and running groups around us. And yes, they're all very supportive. I mean, at the moment, now that we're in lockdown, you can only run with one other person. I'm actually choosing to run solo just because I want to stay safe until I get the jab, hopefully in the next few weeks. But no, the running community here are absolutely awesome and supportive. And as soon as we can get together again in larger groups, I'm sure we will.
Oh, so moving on now to the really exciting part of your running journey. I am absolutely in awe of you, and I was so excited reading the chapters about the Sahara Desert Marathon. I felt like when I was reading it, I was there with you. And, it's one of the marathons, and this is like 150 miles, isn't it, across the Sahara Desert. And it's done in stages. And for me, I just can't see myself doing it because of the heat and the way you described it and the blisters, the sand. And I'm like, oh no, not for me. But I just love hearing other people's tales. And yours was just, oh, wow. Let the listeners know the highlights of the Sahara, because you just made it at the very last minute.
That's right. I had a bit of a health scare shortly before the start. One of the obligations you have to meet to actually take part is to have an ECG done by a doctor, which you take with you. And my ECG was really quite abnormal. And my doctor refused to sign me off. So I had to make a last-minute dash to find a doctor in sports medicine. And he explained to me that the reason my ECG was abnormal was that my heart was very large. And this was due to all the training that I'd done. I had an enlarged heart. It was something known as athlete's heart, which was reassuring to know that I had athlete's heart. And so it was a scare. And when I got out into the desert, I went out there, showed them my ECG, and they said, "Oh, you have a very large heart." And they allowed me to take part. And it is just the most incredible adventure. As you say, it takes place in 6 stages, or it did then. I think it's 5 now. 6 stages. You start relatively short distance of about 16 miles, and you gradually built it up. The 4th stage is actually 48 miles in a single session. So it's an ultra.
Yeah, that was, ladies and gentlemen, if you read the book Running In and Out, that part of the story of the desert is really interesting. I was really gripped on that large stage. It was really interesting, like the emotions you was going through as well, and at each checkpoint whether you should go on to the next one or not.
Oh, it's a very emotional race. You go through some incredible highs and some terrible lows, but you have the support of all those around you, of course, because they're all experiencing the same thing. And some of them, much harder than me. I mean, Miles in my tent, because we slept in a tent overnight, was actually blind. And he finished the race with his guide runner, which was absolutely incredible.
But Miles had another relative there as well that was blind.
His brother, yes, his brother was there, and he was his South African brother, so they both ran it at the same time. I mean, it was just all part of an incredible adventure, but it was just so tough. The temperature, the 5th stage is a marathon, a full marathon, and the temperature on that day was 58 degrees centigrade, which is just so hot, but you're very, you've got a hat on, you've got lots of protective clothing, and it is a dry heat. So in some ways, I've run in some sort of hot but cooler than that places with high humidity, and that I find more difficult.
We'll go on to the next desert, but I just want to find out first, like, when you finished that marathon, what was that feeling inside?
Well, the organizer of it was he was a concert promoter called Patrick Bauer, and he actually visited the desert and then decided he was going to put on this mammoth race. And it's actually Patrick Bauer who puts the medal over your neck at the end. And so, it's just an incredible, very emotional, tearful, all sorts of emotions come pouring out of you when you actually cross that final finish line.
When he put the medal on you, did you fall forward from the weight of it? Because even a little medal that's put on my neck after just a normal marathon, I'm like, my head just dropped straight away. But you just did,
yes,
a couple of days.
It was a very, very heavy, and so yes, you do. You buckle under the weight of it because you're so fatigued.
But that wasn't your only desert experience. You then thought, hang on a minute, I want to try another desert. So then you went on to do one in the Gobi Desert. So if you can explain the one where you went to China.
Yeah, this was another series of races. In fact, here, I think there were 11 stages. We started in Shanghai, we moved to Xi'an, and we did running in each of these places. Xi'an is near where the Terracotta Army is. And then we went out to various places in the Gobi Desert to run around the Gobi Desert, and then into the foothills of Tibet to run in at very high altitude in the foothills of Tibet. And finally finishing by running on the Great Wall of China,
wow.
About 70 miles from Beijing. So that was, each stage was entirely different, but the Gobi Desert ones were particularly hard. Not quite as hot as the Sahara, but, no less tough.
Yeah, I found that interesting when you was describing your experience in the desert, and you was just saying, like, the humidity is different, even though it's hot. You found it tougher than the Sahara. And I was like, a desert's a desert, but you was explaining, no, there are differences in how...
No, desert climates can be quite different in different places, yes. but they are generally hot.
And there
And
was
some of
one point that I found really interesting reading, that like you had an experience where you was running so fast and you couldn't stop.
No, that was quite scary. I was running down the side of a sand dune, and it was a gradual slope, but then it suddenly sort of plummeted, and I realised that I was just out of control. I couldn't stop. I was just going down this very steep sandbank, and it really is quite a frightening experience. Your legs are going faster and faster and faster, and in a way you want to fall just to stop.
And you couldn't.
But you're scared you can't fall. But fortunately for me, there was a short section where it actually flattened out a bit, and I was able to sort of dig my heels in and bring myself to a halt. But my heart was racing like crazy.
And it did make you vomit. So I was like, I read that, I was like, oh, okay. So then you went to the Great Wall. I've been to the Great Wall myself. I'm not for a run, as a tourist holiday. It's very hilly. I was quite surprised how hilly the wall is itself. Was it the same for you when you was running it?
Yeah, no, it's lots of very steep ups and downs. I mean, the run itself was relatively short, but particularly on the downs, there are a lot of steps. Some of the steps are very shallow. Some are, you need a little step ladder to haul yourself up.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's very difficult. And of course, when you're running down a steep part of it, the last thing you want there is to actually trip. So, but nevertheless, to actually run somewhere like that, to say I've run on the Great Wall of China, it is just fantastic.
Respect. But I found interesting that, and you're the only runner I know that's done the Hawaii Marathon, and you didn't enjoy that.
No, I didn't really. It was in Honolulu. When you think of Hawaii and Honolulu, you think of sort of sandy beaches and palm trees and sunshine, and it really poured down. It really rained hard. The wind was blowing, the gales were blowing, and also because they needed the roads cleared for all the traffic, because Honolulu is quite a busy city. It actually started in the very early hours of the morning. And so I was probably 16 miles into the marathon before the sun even came up. Most of it was just in darkness, and running along dual carriageways in darkness. So it wasn't quite the sort of tropical experience. I mean, I spent some time in Honolulu and Hawaii, and obviously I had some good times there, and I did enjoy the beaches and the sunshine. But the race itself, it was really quite tough. But I managed to get to the end of it.
I did like in your book as well that you did say that, and I agree with you, it's what I say as well, the best way to see a city is to run it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, let me see, about nearly 9 years ago, I'd never been to Rome, and I went to Rome with my son, and we ran the Rome Marathon, and it's just fantastic because the route takes you past all the highlights. In the space of 4 or 5 hours, you can run past all the highlights of Rome and see everything. We even saw the Pope up on the Vatican window. So I mean, it was just incredible. So I always say, if you go to a new city, then run round, do its marathon, and you'll get to see all the sights in one go.
But with running as well, it made you pick up a new skill of learning a language. And when you did the China one, because you was mixing with the French organisations, and it was mainly a French participant race, you learned French.
Yeah, I mean, I did French at school, so I sort of had that O-level French, so I knew a little bit of it. But obviously, when I travelled in China, and a few years later with the same French company, I went to Sri Lanka. On both of those occasions, I was the only person there who was actually English. Everybody else was French or Swiss. Some of the French, to be fair, could speak reasonable English, but it did sort of prompt me to actually brush up my French, brush up my O-level French, so that at least I could communicate with them properly.
Is there any other languages you've managed to pick up, or is it just mainly the French?
No, it was really just the French, and that, yeah, as I say, it was a necessity because the organisers of these races were French organisers.
So I have to ask, have you run on every continent?
Yes, I have now. I've done at least a half marathon on all 7 continents. I completed the set just a couple of years ago in Antarctica, and that was just the most amazing experience. Running in Antarctica, the wildlife, just everything about it. It's almost like visiting another planet. It was just an incredible experience. It's a tough journey even to get there, because you have to go first of all to Argentina, and then we sail by boat across the Southern Ocean, which is the roughest seas in the world, for 3 or 4 days, and then eventually get to Antarctica. Obviously, there's nowhere for the ship to tie up, so then you have to sort of disembark into dinghies to get ashore. It was just incredible, Michelle. It was absolutely incredible. I have to tell you the story of one day we were out in the dinghies. We can get 10 people in these dinghies. They just got an outboard motor.
Yeah.
And we were out on the open water, and 2 humpback whales came to see us.
Wow.
And our boat was maybe 15 feet long, and each of these whales was 40 feet long.
Oh, wow.
They could so easily have just tipped us in the water, but they didn't. They just kept popping out of the water and rolling over and showing off.
Oh.
It was just, to be so close to wildlife like that and experience it, just makes the whole trip. Yeah, that's why I love running and traveling. You just get to see the most amazing things.
So it was interesting because you said you had an experience in America in the early days. You did a run when you was, with your family, or went over, and you had experiences over there. You was just saying with nature and wildlife. That was your first taste of running abroad.
Yeah, I'd gone. As I mentioned earlier, sadly, my marriage didn't last, but in an effort to sort of patch things up, we did have a lovely family holiday traveling around the western side of America. And on one occasion, we turned up at our hotel in Bryce Canyon in Utah. And on the reception desk, it said that there was a 5-mile race the following day.
That's sort of thing I would be interested in.
So I signed up for it, and it ran around the perimeter of Bryce Canyon. I don't know if you've ever been to Bryce Canyon, but it's just the most amazing. It's full of all this orange and pink rock statues which have been eroded over millions of years by the wind and the rain, and it's just like a fairy castle land. And that was my first taste, if you like, of running abroad and running in the sort of scenery we couldn't possibly see here. And that really was what sort of fueled my interest, and deciding to go further afield and just experience different places.
So where have you been in South America? Because that's one place I would love to run.
South America, I've been, I went to Rio de Janeiro to run the half marathon in the year of the Rio Olympics.
Oh, wow.
I've been, year before last, I went to Easter Island. First of all to Chile, and then out to Easter Island to run a half marathon on Easter Island. Easter Island is famous for its moai, these massive rock statues which they carved out. So we actually had a run around Easter Island, which was just fantastic. And then on the way back, we went to Peru, and I've been to Machu Picchu.
Yeah, I've been to Peru. I've been to Machu Picchu as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it just fabulous. I mean, I didn't run at Machu Picchu just because of the elevation. Yeah, but you couldn't really. But Easter Island.
Did you do the walking tour? We did the 4 days walking tour, my husband and I.
No, I didn't do the walking to it. We actually went in the easy way on the train,
Oh,
because it was part of the recovery from the Easter Island. It was a sort of stop off on the way back.
I'm shocked that there was even a race on the Easter Island. You just surprised me where all these races are in the world. It seems
Oh,
there's no corner unturned on this planet where there's a race now.
no, there are races everywhere. If you search the internet, you will find races everywhere.
So where is your? I know that you didn't enjoy Hawaii. Where else didn't you enjoy? Would you say, Michelle, stay away from? Because if anyone asked me, I would say Paris because I had a bad experience in Paris. But where would you say, oh, I didn't enjoy that?
I don't know. I mean, say Hawaii, the race itself I didn't enjoy, but I loved the place, so I did enjoy my time there. Each of these foreign races that I've done, each one is very different. I have, some I've struggled, some I've felt really bad. The second day of the race in the Sahara, I felt ill the whole
Yeah.
day. And so I didn't particularly enjoy that, but I loved the whole Sahara experience. So I don't think there's anywhere where I would say, oh, don't go there. Each experience has just been totally different.
So name your top 3 favourites. Antarctica's got to be one of them.
Yeah, Antarctica, the Marathon des Sables in the Sahara, and the Big 5 Marathon in South Africa.
What's this one? What's this one? I haven't heard of that.
The Big 5 Marathon. This was I did the half marathon distance again, and this actually takes place in a game reserve in South Africa, and so in the sort of publicity literature that lures you into entering the race, they say nothing separates you from the wildlife. It's called the Big 5 after the elephant, rhino, buffalo, etc., lion, leopard. All of these animals live in the game reserve, and you actually run amongst all these animals. There are no fences there. It's not like running around a safari park. You're actually running in their territory. And the organisers do surround the local pride of lions.
Yes. I was going to say, did you see anything? Did you experience anything?
Oh, you see so much. You run really closely. You're running with zebra, giraffes, even rhino. 50 yards away from you as you run, there can be rhinos sort of munching away at the grass. It was just absolutely extraordinary. But probably the highlight, if you can call it a highlight, of that particular trip was a couple of days before the race when I was out on what was called a bushwalk. And on a bushwalk, you're out on foot with one of the rangers. There were 8 of us out with 2 rangers.
I remember reading this.
We were ambushed. We were ambushed by 6 elephants, and we were chased by 6 elephants down into a ravine. Obviously, it's an absolutely terrifying experience at the time, but we all lived to tell the tale, I'm happy to say, including the elephants. Eventually, they got literally to within 20 yards of us, and the noise they were making was just absolutely incredible. The trumpeting and roaring as they chased us. And eventually, one of the rangers who did have a rifle fired it a couple of times up into the air, and that was enough to actually deter them and call off the chase. And then we had to sort of make our way back out of the ravine.
I bet you didn't expect to do any speed running that day. That made me laugh.
I certainly ran fast that day. That was probably the scariest moment of my running career. But I mean, it's a good story. Now we all survived. It's a good story, and that group of people have kept in touch ever since.
I'm sure, like, even it was interesting last month. You were saying that you heard from one of the runners, Steve, one of the firefighters that you met at the Sahara
That's right.
Desert.
Yes, yes. I mean, I've had since doing the Marathon des Sables, I've had some contact with Miles, the blind chap, and John, his guided runner. We've seen each other from time to time, but I'd really lost contact with a lot of the others. When you overnight during the separate stages, you are in, I call them loosely tents. They're just a bit of cloth covering your head, really. They haven't got sides to them, but you're in tents with 8 other people, and you become very, very bonded to those 8 other people. I was in the same tent as Miles and John, but there were 3 London firefighters who were in our tent, including Steve North. And then just completely out of the blue, just a week or so ago, I just got a request on LinkedIn from Steve, who'd actually come across my profile on LinkedIn and contacted me. And he's now got a business out in Northern Ireland. But it's just great to be able to link up in my travels. You make so many friends all around the world, and we do stay in touch. It's amazing how much, I've got friends in America and Australia and New Zealand and all over the world, and we keep in touch. And of course, we may well meet up, and indeed we do meet up at future races.
Now, that's what I love about the social media as well, because in the last month alone, I've caught up with runners online that I've met at marathons abroad, and it's just amazing to like still have that connection, and you relive how you met, and
Oh, absolutely! It's just fantastic. You'll never,
never
I
lose
think
that bond, do you?
the group of us who were chased by the elephants have a particular strong bond. And each year on June the 21st, we call it Elephant Day because that's the day that it happened in 2012. So every June the 21st, we have an Elephant Day meeting over social media.
So we talked about races abroad, but what about locally? What's your favourite?
I've done the London Marathon 3 times. I mean, I've done a number of marathons around the UK. Probably because of the atmosphere, I'd say London, just because of the crowds and the support and everything. I prefer 1 lap marathons. I find the 2 lap ones rather hard work when you go through the halfway point and you've got to go all the way around again and you know what's coming. But I've done, we have a Shakespeare marathon in Stratford upon
I've done that one,
which is just down the road from where I live. So that's I do enjoy that. Yeah.
Do you still do marathons now, or do you lower your distance?
I generally lower my distance. Having said that, the last marathon I did was in, not last year, but the year before in October. I did the Venice Marathon, and that was the first one I'd done since the Rome one in 2012.
Oh, so you had a big gap.
Yes, I had. In terms of marathons, I mean, I think since 2012, I've focused more on the half marathon distance, or these sort of multi-stage. I still enjoy these events where you run for several days in a row, but not massive, no more than half marathon in any one day. So I tend to have sort of dropped off the very long distance, the ultras and the marathons. Although, as I say, I did do a full marathon October 2019. That will probably be my last one. But my son always says I've got the breaking strain of a Kit Kat.
I was going to say I cannot see that being your last one. But out of curiosity, how many marathons and ultras have you done so up to date?
I think I've done about 40 marathons. I mean, I'm not a member of the 100 Marathon Club. I've done about 40 marathons, probably, I don't know, 6, 8, 10 ultras. But yeah, I think my favourite distance would be the half marathon because it's something you can recover from, and it's something that you could actually run one day and then still go out and do another race the next day without suffering too badly.
So, as well as a runner, you are an author as well. You've decided to write about your running. As I've mentioned a few times, the Running Hot and Cold, which I'm currently reading. What other books have you written?
Whenever I've travelled abroad, I've usually kept a diary, and obviously I've taken lots of photographs. And I've written a few articles. I wrote when I went to China. I wrote an article about it for Runner's World. So I always used to enjoy writing bits about my running. When I retired back in 2011, I joined an organisation for sort of retired people. It's called University of the Third Age. I mean, that makes it sound a bit academic. It's not a university at all. But basically, it's a group of people, and we have various groups with common interests. And I joined a writing group, and I read some of the pieces to them, and they said to me, no, you really ought to write your story up. And so I did. I started to write the story. Eventually, this produced Running Hot and Cold, which, as you say, you're reading at the moment, and I hope you're enjoying.
I am.
Of course, once Running Hot and Cold was done, I still had quite a lot of stories to tell. So my publishers were so pleased with the success of Running Hot and Cold. It won an award at the Running Awards.
Wow, well done.
It won the Silver Award. It came second to the Park Run book, which I love Park Run as well. So
we'll talk about that because I'm very pleased you're a park runner. So what
yeah,
the titles of your other books?
Yeah, so following the success of the first book, my publishers said, can you write another one? So I did. And this particular book is called Can We Run With You, Grandfather? The story behind that title is a race that I did on my trip to Sri Lanka. We went to Sri Lanka just weeks after the dreadful tsunami that actually killed thousands of people on the island. So it was a very emotional trip. And I was doing a half marathon in Sri Lanka, and the first 6.5 miles were entirely uphill up this mountainside. But you knew when you got to the top of the hill that the next 6.5 miles were down the other side of the mountain. So when I eventually dragged myself up to the peak of this hill, I was met by this group of 6 small children, about, I don't know, maybe 6 to 10 years old, who were standing on the top of the mountain. And as I reached the top, one of them shouted out to me and said, can we run with you, grandfather?
Oh!
and so they joined in. And as we ran down this road, which wound down the mountainside, other children joined me, and we were singing, run, run as fast as you can. You can't catch me, I'm the gingerbread man.
Oh.
By the time we got to the first village, I had about 40 children all singing and dancing and running with me. And it was just an absolutely magical moment, and one I will never, ever forget. And that led to the title of the second book, which is Can We Run With You, Father? And that book culminates in the trip to Antarctica.
Okay,
now,
that's my next book on the list.
Yeah. And now I'm writing a third one. They've asked me to write another one. So I'm now in the process of, in fact, when I finish this talk with you, I should be getting on with a bit more writing, as there's not much else to do on this snowy, icy day.
Can I ask, because when I found reading the, Running Hot and Cold, because I did feel I was getting into the book, it would be nice to see pictures. So on your social media, could you put some pictures up that you took of the Sahara Desert so I can visualize it with you as well?
That's right. With Running Hot and Cold, it came out initially as a Kindle book, and if you look online, that actually had some pictures online, but they didn't get into the paperback. You'll be pleased to know that in Can We Run With You, Grandfather, there are pictures. That there is a section of pictures in the middle. So And certainly in the next book, which hopefully will come out in maybe end of next year, hopefully, if things go. Who knows what's happening at the moment with race?
I was going to say, it's not as if you haven't got time to finish it. What else have you got to do?
Well, the target, my long-term goal at the moment, I've always kept a diary of my runs, and I always encourage people to keep diaries. They are so useful to look back on to see how you got over injuries and everything. But I've always kept a diary of how far I've run, how long it took, and a few notes about it. And so I know how far I've actually run. And I now have about 1,800 miles to go to reach the full diameter of the Earth at the equator.
Wow.
Which is sort of nearly 25,000 miles. So that is the sort of end point of the third book will be actually reaching that point, 1,800 miles, which, as I say, I hope to do. I mean, I've got trips booked for this year, but I just don't know if they're going to happen. With the pandemic, I'm supposed to be going to Iceland and Madagascar to run, but we will have to wait and see what pans out. But I continue running through the pandemic, so I'm slowly, bit by bit, eating away at that distance. As I say, I'm down to about the last 1,800 miles, which I think should be about 18 months.
Can I ask, because you have been a runner for quite a few years, do you watch your diet or do you just eat what you want?
I'm lucky with my weight, really, in that I can pretty much eat what I want. I mean, I do eat what I consider to be a pretty good diet. I like a lot of fruit and vegetables and everything. But I don't have a sort of specific diet. I just eat what appeals to me.
And do you get injured a lot?
Touch wood, luckily, not very often. I did actually, in May of last year, during the first lockdown, suffer a bit of a knee injury, which put paid to most of my running for about 6 weeks. But happily, that sort of pretty well recovered. I mean, I'm getting on now a bit, and so obviously your knees aren't quite as good as they were.
Doug, you're not saying that age is stopping you when you're telling me you've got Iceland, Madagascar, and whatever else planned for the future. I'm sorry. I can see you running till you're way past 100. So don't tell me that you're getting old.
No, it's definitely not stopping me, but it's just slowing me up a little bit.
So you mentioned earlier park run. So where's your local park run?
My local park run is Arrow Valley Park Run in Redditch. It's a 2-lap course. The very first time I ran it was very shortly after my encounter with the elephants in South Africa. I came back from that trip. While I was away, they actually had their inaugural park run at Arrow Valley. So when I came back, I didn't join it until the third running of it, but I was just instantly hooked, and I'm just an absolute lover of park run.
Do you volunteer? That's the important question, Doug.
Yes, I've done lots of volunteering. I've run my last park run before lockdown last March was actually my 349th.
Oh, wow.
So
okay.
My next one will be number 350, but I'm having a long wait for it.
Well, you say that, Doug, at Northampton Park Run, we have a park runner who's 87 and he is on 399.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, our famous Bob. Yeah, he was the oldest park runner in the world to reach 250. And he's waiting for that 400. And he's Christmas Day, apparently, he was seen running around doing a not park run with 400 number on his top.
Oh, bless. It's just fantastic park run. The whole community spirit, the volunteers, everything. I just love it and really, really miss it.
And at the moment, at the park, you've got a memorial, which is really sad for us both. And I'm really glad that you allowed me to do this podcast, and we're going to release it on the 14th of January, which is the day of Lizzie Tovey's funeral. Unfortunately, if you did listen to my episode of Lizzie a few months ago, Lizzie talked about her running, running as visually impaired, her fight with cancer. She sadly passed away on Boxing Day. I know, Doug, you were really good friends with Lizzie personally as well. And in that podcast, Lizzie talked about you, and that's how we connected. So it just felt right that you was the first one of 2020, and we agreed that we would release it on a day to celebrate Lizzie.
Oh, absolutely. Lizzie was just the most inspirational person. Bless her heart. She came to she did an introduction to running, a sort of couch to 5K with a friend of mine, Corinne Elliott. And then she started doing park running. So we met a few times at park run. Now I do a lot of talks for various organisations and running clubs about my travels around the world, sort of illustrated talks. And Lizzie came to a couple of those. And she really loved it, and she got into my books and reading my books. And she always said that was what inspired her to go beyond the 5K distance. And of course, as you know, she eventually got to run the London Marathon with Corinne. And indeed, even in these past year in October, she managed to complete the virtual London Marathon distance within a 24-hour period.
It's amazing, just October just gone, she was running right till the end.
It was just so sad. I mean, she was just about, it was hard enough with her visual impairment to actually run. And I can remember when Lizzie did the park run, and she did it without being tethered to anyone.
Yeah, she talked about that.
Just a fantastic moment, and she had a sort of army of helpers around her in a sort of Kipchoge style, surrounding her to make sure that other people didn't get in her way. But she completed the whole park run, and I know she burst into tears at the end of it with the emotion of it. But if dealing with that visual impairment wasn't enough, she then got the most horrendously aggressive form of cancer early last year, and so sadly I mean, she always said that I was her inspiration, but to me, she's just the most inspiration. If I'm out on a run and I struggle, I immediately think, what would Lizzie do? She would keep going. She would. She was a fighter until the very end. Apart from running at park run, when she didn't run, she would very almost every week volunteer. And she had a particular spot on our 2-lap park run.
Corner.
There is one hill which we have to climb up, which is quite a steep hill, and some people find it quite challenging. And then at the top of the hill, you turn left, sharp left, and start to run back downhill. And that Lizzie and her husband Mark used to stand at that corner, and that they used to ring bells, shout encouragement, encourage people up the hill. And so that corner will now forever be called Tovey Corner. And I've been past it in recent days, and there are some of the most amazing floral tributes there on the corner. It's just beautiful to see. She was loved by so many people. She was such a brave person, and we will all miss her dearly.
Yeah, I'm so thankful to Chris and Simon, who are very close runners as well, that ran with Lizzie, that got in contact with me and said, Michelle, you've got to interview, you've got to have an episode with Lizzie. And I did. And I'm so grateful to those guys, because we did the podcast, but Lizzie, she doesn't stop there. She keeps in contact, and I just felt like we'd known each other for years, and up until near the end, we were still WhatsApping and talking to each other, even while she was in hospital. And then it's lovely being on her Facebook page. I don't know if it's public for listeners to read as well, but how much the running community and just her friends and family, the stories they say about this woman is just, you think listening to the Running Tales podcast, is inspirational enough, but this woman had so many talents, from bakery to craft,
Absolutely.
just
Everything she touched, she was just amazing at. The very last time I saw Lizzie, I was out on a route of mine in Redditch. You've heard of Strava art, presumably.
yeah.
Well, this particular route makes a fantastic T-Rex dinosaur shape.
Okay.
And Lizzie, she was out walking with her Macmillan's buddy Sonia, who's been
Yeah.
so fantastically
Absolutely
supportive.
amazing.
And we stopped and chatted, and Lizzie said she wanted to do, when she felt a bit stronger, she was going to do the dinosaur route with me. Sadly, that day didn't come, but I mean, every time I run that route now, I will have Lizzie sitting on my shoulder, and we'll take her around the dinosaur route, because she would have loved that.
Well, Doug, I'd love it if when, Park Run is back up, that I come and finish, that I come up to Redditch and that you do Park Run with me. I would love that. And
I'll come down to you as well.
Yeah, definitely. That, we'll make them dates when Park Run is back up. But it just goes to show, the running community is just amazing, supporting each other. And like I said, there's more so on Lizzie's Facebook page at the moment. It's just wonderful just to see, even now you get those, I run for Lizzie today, and, just sharing their tales. You just can't help but smile. It's not, with Lizzie, it's not sadness, it's happiness. And I think that she would be so pleased with that.
Yeah, she wouldn't want it to be. She would want everybody to be bright and happy and colourful, because that's what she was. And she was just such a positive person, despite,
a massive really Tiki Boo fan. She liked her Tiki Boos.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Well, Doug, thank you very much for, spending this episode with me and sharing your tales. And I really look forward to finishing your book and reading the next two, because you are an inspiration as well. You're an absolutely amazing character. And I just hope the listeners enjoyed listening to you as much as I have.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. That's really kind of you. No, I've really enjoyed it. I always love it. And perhaps when we can meet in a crowd again, I'll come down to Northampton. I can give your running people one of my talks as well. Then you'll be able to see lots of the pictures that weren't in the first book.
Definitely. I'd definitely love to arrange that. So thank you, Doug. Thank you for today.